The morning sun cast a golden glow across the ancient stones of Windsor Castle as photographers and journalists from around the world gathered outside the gates. Something extraordinary was about to happen, though few knew exactly what it would be. The air buzzed with anticipation as cameras were prepared and microphones tested. Royal watchers who had followed William and Kate for years sensed that today would be different from any other public appearance. Inside the castle walls, Kate stood before a tall mirror in her private chambers, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed down the elegant navy dress she had chosen for the day. Her eyes, usually so bright and confident, held a hint of sadness that she tried desperately to hide. She had faced many challenging moments since becoming part of the royal family, but nothing had prepared her for what lay ahead. The weight of duty had never felt heavier on her shoulders. William entered the room quietly, his footsteps barely audible on the carpeted floor. He paused when he saw his wife, taking in the sight of her standing there looking both strong and vulnerable at the same time. They had been through so much together over the years, weathering storms that would have broken lesser relationships. This moment, however, felt different. It felt final in a way that made his heart ache. The decision had been made weeks ago, discussed in hushed tones during late-night conversations when the children were asleep. They had weighed every option, considered every consequence, and ultimately knew there was only one path forward. The palace staff had been sworn to secrecy, and only a handful of people knew what was about to unfold. Even Queen Elizabeth herself had given her blessing, though her eyes had shown deep concern when they told her. Kate turned to face William, and in that instant everything they needed to say passed between them without words. Years of partnership, of standing side by side through triumphs and tragedies, had created a bond that needed no explanation. He crossed the room and took her hands in his, feeling how cold they were despite the warm summer morning. She looked up at him, and he saw the determination in her eyes fighting against the emotion threatening to overflow. Their children had already been prepared as much as possible for what was coming. George, Charlotte, and Louis had been told in age-appropriate ways, though the full weight of the situation was something they would only understand as they grew older. The thought of their confused faces that morning made Kate's resolve waver for just a moment. William squeezed her hands gently, anchoring her to the present, reminding her why they were doing this. Outside, the crowd had grown larger. Royal enthusiasts held handmade signs expressing their love and support, though they did not yet know what they were supporting. News helicopters circled overhead, and social media was already ablaze with speculation. Royal correspondents spoke into cameras, offering theories about what major announcement might be coming. Some guessed it was about a new charity initiative. Others wondered if there might be another baby on the way. None came close to the truth. The palace's communications team had crafted the statement carefully, revising it dozens of times to get the tone exactly right. It needed to be honest yet dignified, emotional yet appropriate for a formal royal announcement. The words had been approved by senior members of the family, legal advisors, and public relations experts. Still, no amount of careful wording could soften the impact of what they were about to reveal to the world. As the appointed hour approached, William and Kate made their way through the castle's corridors, their footsteps echoing off walls that had witnessed centuries of royal drama. Palace staff they passed paused in their duties, offering respectful nods, their expressions a mixture of admiration and sadness. Everyone who worked closely with the couple had come to love and respect them, making this day particularly difficult for all involved. They reached the blue drawing room, where the official announcement would be made. Television cameras had been set up, their red recording lights waiting to broadcast this moment to billions of people worldwide. A small group of trusted royal correspondents sat in arranged chairs, their notepads ready, their faces serious. They had been chosen specifically for their years of fair coverage and their understanding of the delicate nature of royal protocol. The palace's press secretary stood near the door, clutching the official statement in her hands. She had worked for the royal family for 15 years and had never seen anything quite like this. Her own eyes were misty as she watched William and Kate enter, holding themselves with the grace and composure that the world had come to expect from them. She knew that in moments everything would change. Kate's mind drifted briefly to the first time she had walked through these halls as William's girlfriend, nervous and excited about her future. She remembered the lavish wedding that had captivated the world, the birth of each of their children, The countless charity events and state dinners, the trips abroad representing the crown. Every memory felt precious now, like photographs in an album she was about to close. William thought about his mother, Princess Diana, and how she had navigated her own difficult moments in the public eye. He wondered what advice she might give him now, what strength she might share. He felt her presence somehow, a warm reassurance that they were making the right choice even though it was the hardest choice imaginable. His grandmother's words from their last private meeting echoed in his mind, reminding him that true courage sometimes meant letting go. The press secretary nodded to them, indicating it was time. William and Kate took their positions before the cameras, standing close together but not touching. They had decided to present a united front, to show the world that whatever was happening, they were facing it together. The camera's red lights blinked on, and suddenly millions of people across the globe were watching, waiting, holding their breath without knowing why. William cleared his throat, preparing to speak the words they had rehearsed so many times. Kate lifted her chin slightly, a gesture of strength she had perfected over years of public service. In seconds, they would deliver the message that would send shockwaves around the world. In seconds, everything would be different. But in this brief moment before the storm, they stood together in silence, gathering their courage for what came next. The room was so quiet that the ticking of an antique clock on the mantel seemed impossibly loud. Outside, the crowd's murmur faded as if the world itself was holding its breath. History was about to be made, though no one yet understood how profound this moment would become. William opened his mouth to speak, and the unforgettable goodbye began. William's voice filled the room, steady and clear despite the emotion behind each word. He spoke of duty and family, of difficult decisions made with careful consideration and love. Kate stood beside him, her hands clasped in front of her, her eyes fixed on a point just beyond the cameras. She had promised herself she would not cry, not yet, not while the world was watching. There would be time for tears later, in private moments away from the scrutinizing gaze of millions. The announcement was stunning in its simplicity and devastating in its implications. William explained that after much soul-searching and consultation with family members, they had made the decision to step back from certain royal duties to focus on a personal matter of grave importance. His words were carefully chosen, revealing enough to satisfy public curiosity while protecting the privacy they so desperately needed. Kate's role in the monarchy would be fundamentally altered, though the exact details remained deliberately vague. As William spoke, Kate's thoughts wandered to the phone call she had made to her parents earlier that morning. Her mother's voice had cracked with emotion, offering support while struggling to hide her own worry. Her father had been characteristically stoic, but she could hear the concern underlying his reassuring words. They had always been her anchor, the normal family life she could retreat to when royal pressures became overwhelming. Now she would need their strength more than ever. The royal correspondents in the room sat frozen, their pens hovering over notebooks, trying to process what they were hearing. This was unprecedented in modern royal history. Questions flooded their minds, but protocol demanded they remain silent until the official statement was complete. Their phones buzzed incessantly in their pockets as news editors demanded immediate updates, but they could not look away from the scene unfolding before them. Outside the palace walls, the announcement was being broadcast live on every major news network. In living rooms across Britain, people stopped what they were doing to watch. In offices, workers gathered around televisions and computer screens. Social media erupted with an overwhelming wave of support, concern, and speculation. Hashtags began trending within seconds, and the story dominated every news feed across every platform. William finished his portion of the statement and glanced at Kate, giving her an almost imperceptible nod. It was her turn to speak, and she took a deep breath before addressing the cameras. Her voice was softer than his, but equally steady, carrying the weight of years of public speaking experience. She thanked the British people for their unwavering support over the years, her words genuine and heartfelt. She spoke of the incredible privilege of serving alongside William, of the honor of representing the crown on the world stage. Then Kate said something that made headlines around the globe. She revealed that their decision was motivated by a deeply personal family situation that required their immediate and undivided attention. While she could not share all the details out of respect for those involved, she wanted people to understand that this was not a choice made lightly. It was a choice made out of love, out of necessity, and out of a recognition that sometimes family must come before duty, no matter how important that duty might be. Her words resonated with parents everywhere who had faced impossible choices between career and family. Working mothers felt her struggle in their own hearts. Fathers who had missed important moments for their jobs saw themselves in William's pained expression. In that instant, the royal couple transformed. From distant figures of pageantry into real, people facing a real crisis that transcended titles and crowns. The press secretary stepped forward with printed copies of the official statement, distributing them to the gathered journalists. They immediately began scanning the document for additional details, their journalistic instincts overriding their personal reactions. Within minutes, the statement would be analyzed word by experts and commentators, dissected for hidden meanings and future implications. But in that room, in that moment, there was only the sound of papers rustling and the quiet dignity of two people making an impossible sacrifice. William then did something unexpected. He reached for Kate's hand, breaking royal protocol about public displays of affection during official statements. His fingers intertwined with hers, and she looked at him with such raw emotion that cameras flashed repeatedly, capturing the image that would become the defining photograph of the entire event. It was a gesture that said more than any prepared statement could convey. They were in this together, facing whatever came next as a united team. The couple took a few questions from the selected journalists, answering as honestly as they could within the boundaries they had set. When asked about the children, Kate's voice finally wavered slightly, though she quickly composed herself. She explained that George, Charlotte, and Louis were their primary concern, and all decisions moving forward would prioritize their well-being and privacy. William added that they hoped the media would respect their family's need for space during this challenging transition. One brave journalist asked the question everyone wanted answered but few dared to voice. Would they be leaving the royal family entirely? William's response was measured and thoughtful. He explained that stepping back from certain duties did not mean abandoning their roles or their responsibilities. They remained committed to the crown and to public service, but the shape of that service would necessarily change for the foreseeable future. The specifics would be worked out in the coming weeks in consultation with senior royals and palace officials. As the formal portion of the announcement concluded, William and Kate remained standing before the cameras for a few moments longer, allowing photographers to capture the images that would appear on front pages around the world. Kate's makeup was still perfect, not a hair out of place, but her eyes told the story her words could not. This was goodbye to life as they had known it. Goodbye to the predictable rhythm of royal engagements and public appearances that had defined their marriage. They left the blue drawing room together, walking through a corridor lined with portraits of royals past who had faced their own moments of crisis and change. Palace staff stood respectfully aside as they passed, some wiping tears from their eyes, all of them understanding that they had witnessed something historic. The door closed behind them, and for the first time in hours, William and Kate were alone. In that private moment, away from cameras and crowds, Kate finally allowed the tears to fall. William pulled her close, holding her as years of pressure and pain and worry released in quiet sobs against his chest. They stood there in the empty corridor, just two people trying to be strong for each other, trying to believe they had made the right choice. Outside, the world was reacting with shock and sympathy, but inside those ancient walls there was only the sound of their shared grief and the weight of what they had just done. The news spread across the globe with unprecedented speed. Television networks interrupted regular programming with breaking news bulletins. Radio stations repeated the announcement every few minutes. Newspapers rushed to redesign their front pages, scrambling to capture the magnitude of this moment in bold headlines and striking photographs. The image of William and Kate holding hands during their statement became instantly iconic, reproduced millions of times across every conceivable media platform. In London, crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace despite the rain that had begun to fall. People held umbrellas and homemade signs expressing love and support for the royal couple. Flowers began appearing at the palace gates, bouquets left by well-wishers who felt compelled to physically demonstrate their sympathy and solidarity. Television crews interviewed tearful supporters who spoke of feeling personally connected to William and Kate's struggle, seeing their own family challenges reflected in this very public goodbye. Across the Atlantic, morning news shows in America dedicated entire segments to analyzing the announcement. Royal experts were brought in to provide context and historical perspective, comparing this moment to other significant royal departures and changes throughout history. The consensus was clear: nothing quite like this had happened in the modern era. Even Princess Diana's separation from Charles had not carried this same weight of sacrifice made willingly out of love, rather than discord. In Australia, where it was late evening, families gathered around television sets to watch repeated broadcasts of the statement. Kate had always been particularly beloved in Commonwealth countries, her warmth and genuine interest in people making her a favorite during royal tours. The news hit especially hard there, where many had hoped to see her visit again soon. Social media posts from Australian supporters flooded in, sharing memories of past royal visits and expressing hope that the family would find peace and privacy. Back in Windsor, William and Kate retreated to their private residence, needing these hours away from the public eye to simply breathe and process what they had done. The children were with trusted staff members, kept away from televisions and phones that might expose them to the media frenzy their parents' announcement had created. There would be time to explain things more fully later, but for now, protecting their innocence remained paramount. Kate sat by a window overlooking the gardens, watching rain create patterns on the glass. Her mind replayed every word of the statement, analyzing whether they had said too much or too little, wondering how history would judge their decision. William brought her tea, sitting beside her in comfortable silence. They had been partners long enough to know when words were unnecessary, when simply being present was enough. The palace communications team worked overtime, fielding calls from media outlets around the world requesting interviews and additional information. The official line remained firm. The statement spoke for itself, and the family requested privacy to navigate this transition. Still, the requests kept coming, each journalist hoping to be the one who could offer an exclusive insight or interview. Security was tightened around all royal residences as concerns grew about overzealous media attention. Queen Elizabeth issued her own brief statement late that afternoon, expressing support for William and Kate's decision, while emphasizing that they remained beloved members of the royal family. Her words carried weight and authority, effectively closing down speculation about family discord or disapproval. She understood, perhaps better than anyone, the crushing pressure of duty and the rare moments when personal needs must take precedence. Her statement was short but powerful, reminding everyone that families stick together through difficult times. Other members of the royal family began releasing their own messages of support. Prince Charles spoke of being immensely proud of his son and daughter-in-law, praising their courage in making such a difficult choice. Prince Harry, who had his own complicated history with royal duties and media pressure, was particularly vocal in his support. His statement emphasized understanding the need to protect family above all else, words that resonated with those who remembered his own struggles. The public reaction was overwhelmingly sympathetic, though some critics questioned whether royals had the luxury of stepping back from duties they were born to fulfill. Debate raged on social media and in opinion columns about the nature of royal responsibility and whether personal circumstances should allow for such dramatic changes. Most people, however, sided with compassion over criticism, recognizing that everyone, regardless of position or privilege, faces moments when family must come first. As evening approached, William and Kate finally joined their children for dinner in a private dining room. The children sensed something was different, something important had happened, but their parents' calm presence reassured them. George asked careful questions, his maturity beyond his years evident in how he tried to understand without pressing too hard. Charlotte remained quiet, watching her parents closely, while Louis focused on his meal, too young to grasp the day's significance. After dinner, William and Kate read to the children, maintaining the bedtime routine that provided structure and normalcy amid chaos. The familiar stories offered comfort, reminding everyone that some things remained constant even as their world shifted dramatically. Kate's voice was soothing as she read, and William sat close, his presence a steady anchor for his family. These simple moments of togetherness felt more precious than ever. Once the children were asleep, William and Kate finally checked their phones for the first time since the announcement. The number of messages was overwhelming. Friends from their university days, former colleagues, distant relatives, and even strangers who had somehow obtained their personal numbers all reached out with words of support and love. Reading through them was both heartwarming and exhausting, a reminder of how many lives they had touched over the years. Kate found a message from a woman she had met years ago at a charity event for families dealing with serious illness. The woman wrote about how Kate's kindness during their brief meeting had given her strength during her darkest days. Now the woman wanted to return that gift, offering prayers and support for whatever challenge the royal family faced. Kate showed the message to William, both of them moved by this stranger's compassion and the reminder that their public service had mattered, had made real differences in real lives. They stayed up late into the night, talking through plans and contingencies, discussing how they would handle the coming days and weeks. Lawyers would need to be consulted, official roles would need to be reassigned, and countless logistical details would require attention. But tonight was not for logistics. Tonight was for grieving what they were losing, even as they affirmed why the sacrifice was necessary and right. William held Kate as they finally prepared for sleep. Both of them exhausted emotionally if not physically. They had faced down cameras and crowds, delivered the hardest message of their lives and survived the initial wave of global reaction. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more questions, and continued scrutiny. But they had done the hardest part. They had said goodbye to the life they had known, and somehow they had done it together with dignity and love that would resonate with people around the world for years to come. The following morning brought no relief from the media attention. If anything, the story had grown larger overnight as international newspapers ran their analyses, and commentators offered various interpretations of what the announcement truly meant. Front pages across Europe, Asia, and the Americas all featured the same image: William and Kate standing together, hands clasped, facing an uncertain future with quiet courage. The photograph had become a symbol of sacrifice, love, and the human cost of public life. Inside Windsor, staff members moved through their duties with unusual quietness, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace the family had found. Breakfast was served in private quarters, away from the formal dining rooms where protocol usually dictated every movement. Kate picked at her food, her appetite diminished by stress and lack of sleep. William read through briefing papers prepared by advisors, though his concentration wavered as his mind kept returning to practical concerns about their family's immediate future. The children's school had been notified of the situation, with special arrangements made to protect them from unwanted attention. Extra security was discreetly positioned around the school grounds, and teachers were briefed on how to handle any questions or issues that might arise. George, as the eldest, would face the most scrutiny from curious classmates who had seen their parents watching news coverage the previous evening. The school's headmaster personally assured William and Kate that their son would be protected and supported. By mid-morning, palace officials arrived for scheduled meetings to discuss the logistics of the transition. These conversations were necessarily detailed and sometimes painful, as each decision reinforced the reality of what was being left behind. Certain patronages would need to be transferred to other royals. Scheduled appearances would have to be canceled or reassigned. Staff positions would be affected, though the palace promised to handle personnel changes with sensitivity and care. Kate found these meetings particularly difficult, having grown close to many of the people and organizations she had supported over the years. Her work with early childhood development had been more than just a royal duty. It had been a genuine passion that had driven real policy changes and helped countless families. Knowing that someone else would take over this work felt like losing a piece of herself, even though she understood the necessity. During a break between meetings, William found Kate standing in the portrait gallery, looking at paintings of royals who had faced their own crises centuries ago. He came to stand beside her, and they studied the faces of people long dead who had navigated impossible situations with varying degrees of success and grace. History offered both comfort and caution, reminding them that they were not the first to face difficult choices, but also that such choices carried lasting consequences. The afternoon brought a private visit from Prince Charles, who came alone without advisors or staff. Father and son walked through the gardens together, speaking candidly about duty, sacrifice, and the weight of expectations that came with royal birth. Charles shared his own struggles with balancing personal happiness and public responsibility, offering wisdom earned through decades of navigating the complexities of royal life. His support meant everything to William, who had sometimes felt torn between his father's traditional views and his own instincts about modern monarchy. When Charles met with Kate separately, their conversation was equally meaningful. He had watched her grow from a nervous young woman uncertain of her place to a confident duchess beloved around the world. He told her that her grace under pressure had impressed him deeply, and that whatever challenges the family faced, he had complete faith in her strength and wisdom. Kate felt tears threatening again but managed to maintain composure, thanking him for his kindness and understanding during this impossible time. As evening approached, William and Kate made the difficult decision to venture out briefly, wanting to acknowledge the supporters who continued gathering outside the palace gates despite the rain and cold. Security initially advised against it, but they insisted, feeling it was important to personally thank those who had shown such unwavering loyalty. The appearance was not announced in advance, making it all the more powerful when they suddenly emerged to speak with the crowd. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. People surged forward, respectfully but eagerly, wanting to offer words of encouragement and support. Flowers were pressed into Kate's hands until she could barely hold them all. William shook hands and accepted heartfelt messages, his expression grateful and humble. Many in the crowd were crying, moved by the opportunity to express their feelings directly to the couple they had followed and admired for so many years. One elderly woman caught Kate's attention, standing slightly apart from the main crowd with a small handwritten sign that simply read, "We love you." Kate approached her directly, taking her weathered hands in her own. The woman explained that she had followed Kate's journey since the engagement announcement, feeling connected to her despite the vast differences in their lives. She wanted Kate to know that whatever was happening, she had the prayers and support of millions who saw her not just as a duchess, but as a fellow human being facing life's challenges with courage. The brief walkabout lasted only 15 minutes, but its impact was profound. Photographs of Kate accepting flowers with tears in her eyes, of William embracing an elderly veteran who thanked him for his service, of the couple standing together acknowledging the crowd's cheers, all circulated rapidly online. The gesture reinforced what the statement had begun, showing that behind the titles and protocol were real people making real sacrifices for deeply personal reasons. Back inside, emotionally drained but somehow strengthened by the public's response, William and Kate reviewed more practical matters with their private secretary. Financial arrangements needed to be discussed, as stepping back from certain duties would affect their official budget and resources. They would need to become more financially independent, possibly requiring William to pursue private work in ways he had never considered before. The reality of these changes was sobering but not frightening. They had each other, and that felt like enough. Later that evening, Kate spent time writing thank you notes to key staff members and supporters whose assistance had been invaluable during the transition planning. Her handwriting flowed across the cream-colored palace stationery, each word carefully chosen to express genuine gratitude, without revealing too much about the private circumstances that had necessitated their decision. These letters would be treasured by recipients, tangible reminders of a historic moment and the grace with which it was handled. William made phone calls to family members who had not been present for the announcement, ensuring everyone heard directly from him how things were unfolding. His brother, his cousins, his grandmother's private secretary, each conversation reaffirming that the family remained united despite the dramatic changes. These bonds of family loyalty would be crucial in the months ahead when scrutiny intensified and questions multiplied. As they prepared for bed, Kate and William stood together at the window, looking out at the lights of Windsor and beyond. Somewhere out there, millions of people were talking about them, speculating about their lives, forming opinions about their choices. But here, in this private moment, they were simply two people who loved each other, who loved their children and who had done what they believed was right regardless of the cost. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they had peace. A week had passed since the announcement, and the world was still processing the implications of William and Kate's decision. News cycles had moved on to other stories, but the royal couple remained a constant presence in background conversations and think pieces analyzing modern monarchy. Experts debated whether this marked a turning point in how royal duty would be understood by future generations. Some argued it represented a healthy evolution toward prioritizing mental health and family well-being. Others worried it set a dangerous precedent that could undermine centuries of tradition. William had begun meeting with advisors about potential private sector opportunities that would allow him to support his family while maintaining dignity and avoiding conflicts. Of interest with his royal position, these conversations were delicate and sometimes uncomfortable, as he navigated the unfamiliar territory of considering himself as someone who might need to earn an income outside official duties. Yet there was also something liberating about imagining work chosen for its personal meaning rather than inherited obligation. Kate spent her days establishing new routines for the family, creating structure that would help them all adjust to their changed circumstances. She took the children on quiet walks through the Windsor grounds, using these moments to answer their questions honestly while shielding them from the harsher realities of media speculation. George had started asking more pointed questions about why things were different now, displaying an awareness that sometimes made Kate's heart ache with the knowledge that his childhood could never be truly normal. The mailroom at the palace was overwhelmed with letters from around the world. Tens of thousands of messages arrived daily, most expressing support and sharing personal stories of sacrifice and difficult choices. Kate tried to read as many as possible, finding comfort in the shared humanity these strangers offered. One letter came from a mother who had left a promising career to care for a sick parent, understanding intimately the bittersweet nature of choosing love over ambition. Another came from a father who had turned down a promotion to spend more time with his children, never regretting that decision despite the financial struggles it caused. These stories reminded Kate that while their circumstances were unique in their public nature, the core dilemma they faced was universal. Every parent, every spouse, every person who loved someone faced moments when competing priorities demanded impossible choices. Their decision to step back was not weakness but recognition that some things mattered more than prestige or duty. The letters reinforced this truth, offering validation from people who had walked similar paths in their own lives. William found unexpected support from former military colleagues who understood the concept of sacrifice for something greater than oneself. They wrote to him about coming home from deployment to children who had grown in their absence, about marriages strained by separation, about the constant tension between service to country and service to family. Several mentioned that they admired his courage to choose differently than tradition demanded, seeing it not as abandonment of duty, but as a different kind of courage altogether. The palace began releasing updates about how various responsibilities would be redistributed among other royals. Princess Anne would take on additional patronages, her well-known work ethic making her the natural choice for increased duties. Other family members stepped forward willingly, understanding that supporting William and Kate meant ensuring their work continued even in their reduced capacity. The transition was being handled with such care and efficiency that most organizations barely noticed the change in their royal patron. Kate accepted an invitation to have tea with several women, who ran charities she had worked with closely over the years. The meeting was private, held in a small sitting room away from cameras and recording devices. These women had become more than professional contacts. They were friends who had worked alongside her in meaningful efforts to improve children's lives. Saying goodbye to this work, even partially, felt like losing a piece of her identity that she had carefully built over years of dedicated service. One charity director, a woman who had founded an organization supporting families with seriously ill children, spoke with particular insight. She told Kate that sometimes the greatest gift they could give was showing others that it was acceptable to prioritize family, that success was not measured solely by professional achievement or public recognition. By making their choice publicly and with dignity, William and Kate were giving permission to countless others to make similar choices without shame or apology. The impact of their example might ultimately reach more people than any single charity initiative ever could. This perspective offered Kate a new way to understand their situation. Perhaps stepping back was not abandoning their mission, but fulfilling it in a different way. By demonstrating that even people in the highest positions of privilege and power sometimes needed to put family first, they were making a statement about values that transcended royal duty. They were saying that no job, no matter how important, was worth sacrificing the well-being of those you loved most. William spent an afternoon going through photographs from their years of public service. Images of overseas tours, charity visits, state dinners, and ceremonial occasions told the story of a life lived largely for others. He felt pride looking at these pictures, knowing that their presence had brought comfort to suffering people. raised awareness for important causes, and represented their country with honor. Yet interspersed among the official photographs were candid shots of him and Kate laughing together, stealing private moments amid public duties, their genuine affection evident even in formal settings. These private moments reminded him why they had fallen in love in the first place, before titles and responsibilities complicated everything. Kate had brought lightness into his life, a sense of normalcy and joy that had sustained him through the pressures of royal existence. Protecting her and their children, was worth any professional sacrifice. The photographs reinforced his certainty that they had made the right choice. Even when doubt occasionally crept in during difficult moments, the couple attended a private family dinner with the Queen, Prince Charles, and other senior royals. The evening was carefully orchestrated to project family unity and support, but it also provided genuine connection and reassurance. Over good food and wine, they talked not as royals but as family members who cared for each other beyond titles and tradition. The Queen shared stories from her own long reign, times when she had questioned her choices, moments when duty had demanded painful sacrifices. Her willingness to be vulnerable strengthened William's resolve and reminded him that doubt was natural, even necessary when making important decisions. As the week drew to a close, William and Kate took time to reflect on everything that had happened. They sat together in their favorite room, a cozy space filled with family photographs and personal mementos that made it feel more like home than palace. They talked about fears and hopes about what came next and how they would handle the ongoing scrutiny, but mostly they talked about their children and the future they wanted to build for them. A future where love and family came first, where duty was honored, but never at the expense of the people who mattered most. In choosing this path, they had lost some things but gained something more valuable: the freedom to prioritize what truly mattered, the courage to live according to their values rather than others' expectations, and the certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. 3 months had passed since the announcement that captivated the world. The initial frenzy had settled into a new normal, though public interest remained high. William and Kate had successfully established a quieter life, one that balanced remaining royal responsibilities with the increased privacy they needed for their personal situation. The transition had not been seamless, but it had been achieved with grace and determination that only deepened public admiration for them. The family had moved to a smaller residence within the Windsor estate, a home that felt more intimate and manageable than the grand spaces they had previously occupied. Kate had personally overseen the decorating, choosing warm colors and comfortable furniture that made every room feel welcoming. This was not a showplace for visiting dignitaries, but a true home where children could run freely and parents could breathe without the constant weight of formality pressing down on them. George had adjusted better than expected to the changes, finding relief in the reduced attention and more time with his parents. His school reports showed improved focus and happiness, as if some burden had been lifted from his young shoulders. Charlotte had blossomed in the increased family time, her natural creativity encouraged by a mother who now had more hours to spend reading stories and working on art projects together. Louis, still quite young, simply enjoyed having his parents more present and available. William had found meaningful work consulting for several conservation organizations, using his platform and knowledge to advance environmental causes without the formal constraints of official royal duties. The work fulfilled him in ways he had not anticipated, allowing him to speak more freely and take positions that might have been complicated by his former role. He traveled less frequently but more purposefully, and he always returned home energized rather than exhausted. Kate had continued her advocacy work, but on her own terms and timeline. She gave fewer speeches but wrote more articles, sharing her insights and research about early childhood development without the pressure of constant public appearances. Her words reached wider audiences through careful use of social media and strategic partnerships with publications. She discovered that impact did not always require physical presence. Sometimes words and ideas could travel farther than any royal tour. The media landscape around them had shifted too. While tabloids still published speculative stories, mainstream coverage had become more respectful, acknowledging the boundaries the couple had established. Some photographers had been caught violating privacy agreements and faced legal consequences, sending a clear message that the old rules of constant surveillance no longer applied. William and Kate had proven willing to share certain moments on their terms while fiercely protecting others, and most media outlets had learned to respect this balance. Public opinion polls consistently showed strong support for the couple's decision, with particularly high approval among younger generations who valued mental health and work-life balance. The phrase "choosing family first" had entered common discourse, often cited in conversations about workplace culture and parenting challenges. William and Kate had unintentionally sparked broader, societal discussions about the cost of ambition and the importance of protecting personal well-being even in demanding careers. Other public figures began sharing their own stories of stepping back from high-profile positions to address personal or family needs. A corporate executive wrote an op-ed about leaving her CEO position to care for aging parents, citing William and Kate's courage as inspiration. A professional athlete announced early retirement to spend more time with young children, explicitly referencing the royal couple's example. Their decision had created permission for others to make similar choices without shame. The palace had successfully managed the transition of responsibilities, and the monarchy continued functioning smoothly with redistributed duties. In fact, some observers noted that the changes had revitalized certain roles, as other royals brought fresh perspectives to patronages and initiatives. The institution proved more flexible and resilient than critics had feared, adapting to changing circumstances while maintaining core traditions and functions. Kate and William marked the 3-month anniversary of their announcement with a quiet dinner at home. No photographers or fanfare, just the two of them after the children were asleep. They reflected on how far they had come, acknowledging the difficulties while celebrating the unexpected gifts this new life had brought. They laughed more now, worried less about protocol, and felt more authentically themselves than they had in years. They discussed the future with cautious optimism. The personal situation that had precipitated their decision was being managed with the best care possible, and while challenges remained, they faced them with renewed strength and unity. They had learned that stepping back was not giving up but rather regrouping, gathering resources and approaching life from a more sustainable position. They could not have continued on the previous path without breaking something essential in themselves or their family. Letters still arrived weekly from people around the world, though the volume had decreased from the initial deluge. Kate tried to read several each day, finding inspiration in the stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances with courage and creativity. One particularly moving letter came from a young woman who had been contemplating suicide, but had been moved by Kate's vulnerability during the announcement. Seeing someone admired and seemingly perfect acknowledge struggle and prioritize healing, had given this woman permission to seek help for her own mental health crisis. Kate kept this letter in a special box, a reminder that openness about difficulty could literally save lives. William had reconnected with old friends from university and military service, relationships that had been strained by the demands of royal life. These friendships enriched his days with genuine connection and normalcy, reminding him of who he was beyond titles and expectations. He played more sports, laughed more easily, and felt younger than he had in years. The stress lines that had been deepening around his eyes had softened, replaced by an expression of contentment that photograph comparisons clearly showed. The couple began planning a small family holiday, something they had rarely been able to do spontaneously in their previous life. They would travel to a private location, just the 5 of them with minimal security, and spend a week simply being together without schedules or obligations. The anticipation of this trip brought excitement to the entire family, a reminder that the sacrifices they had made had purchased something precious, time and freedom to create memories unencumbered by duty. As Kate tucked the children into bed that night, reading the final pages of a beloved story, she felt a peace she had not known in years. The goodbye they had said to their former life had been painful and public, but it had also been necessary and ultimately redemptive. They had shown the world that even people in the most privileged positions faced impossible choices, that duty and love sometimes conflicted, and that choosing love was not weakness but the highest form of courage. William joined her in the children's room for goodnight kisses, and they stood together in the doorway watching their sleeping children. These 3 precious souls were the reason for everything, the why behind every difficult decision. In protecting them, in prioritizing family over fame, William and Kate had not diminished themselves, but had finally become fully who they were meant to be. Not just royals, but parents first and foremost, partners in the truest sense, and human beings brave enough to live according to their values regardless of the cost. The unforgettable goodbye had captivated hearts around the world, not because it was dramatic or scandalous, but because it was deeply human. It reminded everyone watching that beneath crowns and titles, beyond wealth and privilege, were two people trying their best to love well and protect what mattered most. In that universally relatable struggle, they had touched something profound in the human experience, and the world had responded not with judgment but with understanding, not with criticism but with compassion. That was their true legacy. More lasting than any royal duty they had performed, more meaningful than any title they held. The simple but revolutionary act of choosing love when the world expected duty, and having the courage to live with that choice in full view of millions.